Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanako.
Welcome! Today we're diving into a really fascinating period in Japan, looking at how things were changing really at the ground level in rural communities.
Yeah, for those of you just starting out with Japanese history, this is all about how villages started, well, organizing themselves and sometimes even pushing back against the powers that be. Think grassroots movements, medieval Japanese style.
Okay, so where do we begin? Late 14th century, you mentioned.
Exactly. So you have these powerful military governors, the Shugo daimyo, becoming more prominent. And alongside that, you see this new type of community starting to form in the villages.
Villages that were like under estate lords and local lords already.
Right. The Shon, Rishu, and Kokujin, these new communities were called Sush or Susan. Basically, influential farmers got together and sort of pulled the smaller farmers into these alliances.
Alliances for what purpose, though? What was the goal?
Well, it was kind of twofold. First, just mutual protection. There was a lot of warfare going on. And second, it was about resisting the control of those local and estate lords.
Ah, okay. Strengthen numbers, basically.
Precisely, both for physical safety and, having a stronger voice against the rulers.
So how did they actually work, these?
This is where it gets really interesting. They developed quite strong self-governing features. They'd elect their own leaders.
Leaders? Like village chiefs?
Sort of, yeah. Often they were actually local samurai, guys called satabito or otona. And these leaders would handle things like local policing. They even conducted trials sometimes.
Hold on, their own policing and trials at the village level.
Mm-hmm. It shows a remarkable degree of autonomy, doesn't it? They often had their own military capability, too, for defense.
Wow. So how do they keep it all organized?
They had meetings. The members, the Subyakushu, held these assemblies called Sutu. And that's where they'd established the village rules, the Mura Okaid or Shu Okaid.
So they were literally writing their own local laws.
That's right. They weren't just passively accepting rules from above. And another key thing, land.
Land? How so?
They often owned land collectively. Areas called Tsukuchi or Iriaichi. This land was for the whole community.
Collective ownership. That must have really bound them together.
It absolutely did. It fostered this strong sense of shared interest. And it meant the Suson could act as one unit when dealing with lords.
Like for taxes.
Exactly. They'd take on collective responsibility for the annual taxes that was called Hiyakushuki or Jigyu-yuke. And they weren't shy about demanding exemptions or reductions if needed. They were active negotiators.
Okay, so these villages are getting pretty organized, pretty assertive. How did the lords react? The Shinrushu and Kokujin.
Well, as you can imagine, they weren't always thrilled. They often turned to the bigger players, the Shugo daimyo, for help in, keeping these Susan in check.
So they called in the bigger guns.
Kind of. And the Shugo daimyo, in turn, used this situation to strengthen their own control. They implemented things like Hansei, basically taking half the tax revenue from estates, and Shugo-yuk, where the governor contracted to collect taxes directly.
Ah, so the Shuthsun's push for autonomy indirectly led to the Shugo daimyo getting more power over those areas.
That's a really key dynamic, yeah. It shifted the power balance. And then these empowered Shugo daimyos started imposing their own direct taxes on the Susa.
Like what kind of taxes?
Things like land taxes, tanbetsu danzini, and demands for labor service, ninbetsu fuyaku. So you see this constant push and pull, this struggle for control.
It's complex. Now, we actually have a perspective from someone higher up the social ladder, right? A court noble.
Yes, Kuju Masamoto. He kept a diary, the Masamoto-ku Tabi Hikitsuke, while staying on his family's estate Hine Nosho for about 3.5 years, starting in 1501.
And what did he see from his point of view?
He was really struck by the unity of the peasants. He noted that even when he, the estate lord, gave a direct order, their response was always, "We'll discuss it at the assembly first."
Wow. Even the lord's command had to go through the village meeting.
Yep. It really shows you how powerful that suit assembly was. It was the ultimate decision-making body, and its rules, the Mura Okaid, governed everything.
Including justice, as you mentioned earlier.
Yes, and he recorded a really grim example of that. During a famine, a young boy stole some bracken flour just trying to survive.
Oh, dear.
But the principle of collective responsibility, Enzasi, kicked in. The boy, another boy, and their mother were all executed.
Executed for stealing flour during a famine.
Yes. And Masamoto wrote about how distressed he was that he couldn't intervene. The village's authority was absolute in that sense.
That's sobering, a really harsh reality behind the self-governance.
It certainly is. But Masamoto wasn't only negative. He actually highly praised the villagers' skills in the performing arts.
Oh. Like what?
Particularly Sarugaku, a kind of theater, performed during village festivals. He thought their skill level was comparable to performers in the capital, Kyoto.
So it wasn't all just hardship and strict rules. There was culture, community life.
Exactly. A complex picture, strong unity, self-rule, sometimes brutal justice, but also vibrant cultural expression.
And this spirit of, well, sticking together and sometimes resisting, it started to evolve, didn't it? Beyond just negotiating taxes.
We did. Initially, resistance was often passive. Peasants might make direct appeals shustus or gushu, or if things got really bad, they might just abandon their fields and flee to the mountains. That was called chusan.
Running away is a form of protest.
Essentially, yes. Ways to object without direct confrontation. But as the Shugo's control, tightened, things escalated.
Oh, so.
Peasants started linking up with neighboring villages. They formed larger regional groups called gu or kumi, and their actions became more assertive.
More than just appeals or fleeing.
Oh, yes. They started staging unified group actions protests, basically. These are known as iki. And sometimes, large groups would flee together to other villages as a stronger form of protest.
Okay, so Iki, that sounds like a step up. From village-level organization to regional uprisings.
Well, uprising is one meaning. Iki basically means a league, an alliance, a unified group action. And they became much more common and powerful. Eventually, they developed into these widespread armed uprisings called Tsuchi Iki peasant uprisings.
Armed uprisings. Challenging the Shugo daimyo.
Yes, militarily. These weren't just scattered protests anymore. And there's a fascinating aspect to how these Iki groups solidified their unity.
Full on.
Going back even earlier, temple groups, armed monks and peasants, often swore oaths to deities when they planned joint actions.
Calling on the gods for support.
And for unity. They practiced something called Ishi Danketsu one-mind unity. Sometimes they'd perform a ritual, write down their oath, a kishimon, burn it before a deity, mix the ashes with sacred water, and then drink it.
Drink the ashes. What?
It symbolized that their decision was now, divinely sanctioned, that the gods were with them. It gave them incredible conviction to pursue goals that might seem impossible.
That's intense. A really powerful bonding ritual.
Absolutely. And these kinds of unified actions, and the groups doing them, are what we call iki. We even have physical evidence, like a kishimon from an iki in Taranosho, Wakasa province.
What was that one about?
They were protesting against illegal acts by the local lord's deputy. And what's interesting is that it includes the simple written seals, the kosh, of loads of ordinary peasants, not just the leaders.
Suggesting broader participation, more democratic in a way.
Perhaps, yeah. A shift from just the powerful farmers running things. And these ikis weren't limited to peasants.
Oh, who else got involved?
Local lords, the kokujin, and local samurai, jizamurai, started forming their own leagues, kokujin iki and jizamurai iki. They'd create written contracts, sometimes called kasaju or renban, pledging to act together, especially when things got unstable.
So alliances were shifting all over the place. Samurai and local lords teaming up. That must have really shaken the old order.
Definitely. And they even had a way of signing these pacts to show equality among members, the kasa renpan, or umbrella-style signature, where everyone signed radially around a central point.
Like spokes on a wheel. Neat symbolism. So while all this is happening at the local and regional level, what's going on with the central government, the bakufu?
Well, things were getting unstable there too. After the powerful shogun Ashikaga Yoshimitsu died, the Shugo daimyo he'd kept in check started gaining power under his successor, Yoshimochi.
How did that show?
Get this. When Yoshimochi was dying, the Shugo actually asked him to name a successor. He refused, basically saying, "You guys figure it out," which tells you how much influence they thought they had.
So the governors were practically dictating terms to the shogunate.
It was heading that way. In the end, they chose Yoshimochi's younger brother, Yoshinori, who was actually a monk at the time, as the next shogun, and the selection was made by lottery.
By lottery? That seems random for choosing a national leader.
It certainly highlights the political maneuvering and perhaps the lack of consensus. And right after Yoshinori takes power in 1428, boom, the Shichi no Tsuchi Iki breaks out, a massive peasant uprising.
Just like that, what triggered it?
It started with transport workers, the Bashaku in Sakamoto, demanding debt cancellation to Kusei. That demand caught fire and spread rapidly to peasants all around Kyoto.
Tokusei again. Debt cancellation. Why was that such a huge issue?
Well, think about it. Many peasants were drowning in debt to moneylenders, often based in storehouses called tsuchikura, but also to sake brewers, sakaya, and even temples, which were major lenders too.
So the Iki targeted them.
Directly. They attacked the moneylenders, the brewers, the temples, seized the loan documents, tore them up, and basically declared all debts null and void.
A very direct form of economic protest.
Extremely direct. And remember those transport workers, the Bashaku, especially around Kyoto, Nara, Lake Biwa, the Yodo River, they weren't just moving goods.
They were moving information.
Exactly. Spreading news, rumors, coordinating things. They were crucial communication links that helped the uprising spread so fast.
Like an early information network fueling the fire.
Precisely. And we know about this event quite well, partly thanks to records like the Daijin Nikki Mokoroku. It's a diary kept by a high-ranking monk, Jinsen, part of the top court nobility.
So even the elites were documenting these peasant uprisings.
Oh yeah, there were significant events. Jinsen's diary is a crucial source for understanding the politics and society of the time, including this Shushno Tokuseiki.
Okay, so the new shogun, Yoshinori, sees this massive uprising demanding debt relief right as he takes power. How does he respond?
He clearly saw the threat, both from the peasants and the powerful Shugo daimyo. So he tried to clamp down, strengthen the shogun's authority.
How?
He went after powerful figures who challenged him. He attacked Ashikaga Moshuji, who headed the kind of independent regional government in Kamakura, forcing him to commit suicide. That's the Aiki Rebellion. And he continued to punish other powerful shugo.
Trying to reassert central control. Did it work?
Well, it certainly made him enemies. His strong-arm tactics created a lot of resentment among the shugo. And in 1441,
Uh-oh.
Shugen Yoshinori was assassinated, killed by Akamatsu Mitsusuke, the shugo of Harima province, who felt threatened by Yoshinori's moves against him. This is the Kakitsu incident.
A shogun assassinated by one of his own governors? Things were really falling apart.
It shows just how volatile the power struggles were. And guess what happened immediately after the assassination?
Let me guess. Another Ikki.
You got it. Another huge Tokusei Ikki flared up, demanding the Bakufu, which was in total chaos after the shogun's murder issue, an official debt cancellation decree.
And did they?
They had to. They were in no position to resist. That's the Kakitsu no Topusei Ikki. The peasants basically forced the government's hand.
So these uprisings were now directly dictating policy from the central government.
Increasingly, yes. These Tokusei Ikki demanding debt cancellation just kept happening, especially around Kyoto and Nara. The Bakufu simply couldn't stop them.
So they just kept issuing debt cancellation orders, the tokuseirei.
They did, multiple times. It
Yeah.
really shows how much their authority had weakened.
But that must have caused problems too, right? If debts are constantly canceled, what happens to the lenders and the taxes the Bakufu got from them?
Good point. The Bakufu's solution was, well, a bit desperate. To make up for the lost tax revenue for the Tsuchikura and Sakaya, whose loans were being canceled, they started charging a special fee.
A fee on who?
Sometimes on the borrowers, sometimes on the lenders. It was called buchi-sen, usually 1/10 of the debt, or sometimes nibui-sen, 2/10. Paying this fee could either grant you the benefit of the tokusei or exempt you from it, depending on who paid.
That sounds complicated and probably unfair.
It was basically the government trying to profit from the chaos, and it likely just weakened their authority even further. It didn't fix the underlying problems.
And we have actual physical proof of these tokusei demands being enacted locally, right? Not just government decrees.
We do. A really amazing example comes from Yagyu in Yamato province. Remember the Shuchi-ikki in 1428?
Yeah, the one right after Yoshinori became shogun.
Well, it spread like wildfire. And in Yagyu, specifically the 4 villages of Kanbei, they implemented their own tokusei. And they carved it in stone.
Carved it in stone.
Yep, there's this big rock about 3 meters high with a carving of a Jizu statue, one believed to cure smallpox. And right on it, they inscribed, basically, from Shushush 1, 1428 onwards, debts owed by the 4 villages of Kanbei shall not be pursued.
Wow, a public declaration etched in rock canceling debts.
Exactly. It's a declaration of debt annulment for anything before that year.
Mm.
And this wasn't an official order from a lord. This is seen as a shitokusei, a private or self-declared tokusei carried out by the shusen itself.
That's incredible. Where is this inscription?
It's right near the busy Yagi Road, next to that Jizu stone Buddha. The location is probably significant, placing it near a sacred image at a public road, likely aimed to give it, legitimacy, maybe even divine backing in the eyes of the community.
A clear message for everyone to see.
Absolutely. And this kind of thing happened elsewhere, too. Often, when a new shogun took power, or during natural disasters, Susan would initiate these local tokusei movements. And when these spread, they often grew into the larger tokusei ikki that pressured the Bakufu for those official decrees.
So it really paints a picture, doesn't it? These seemingly small villages organizing themselves, managing their affairs, developing their own rules and culture.
And then taking collective action, forming leagues, challenging lords, even influencing the central government's policies through these powerful iki. It's real bottom-up change.
These Susan and Iki really were potent forces for community action and social change right from the grassroots.
Definitely. And it makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you look at these examples of collective action, of resistance in medieval Japan,
Yeah.
how do they resonate today?
You mean compared to modern social movements or community organizing?
Yeah. What are those fundamental human needs, those desires for security, for fairness, for a voice that drive people then and now to come together and demand change? It's something worth mulling over.